Yo soy
In
Álvaro.
English.
I am Álvaro Antonio Pineda.
Where are we?
We are in San Felipe de Jesus, a village of Antigua Guatemala, which is part of the Republic of Guatemala, and that it's in Central America. And Central America is in America. And America is one of the continents of the world. And that's part of the earth.
So you've been on this earth how long?
Son of a gun, 85 years.
85 years. How does it feel to be 85? How does it feel to be 85?
Well, it's hard to believe that I'm 85,
Yeah.
because 85 is a lot of years. And yet, I live them, and happily so, because I don't regret one bit out of it.
Yeah. So when you look back at your life, what would you like to be most remembered for?
I think my academic life, because I did what I had always done, which was to teach. But in academic life, I refer to the teaching of the people that are in a stratus higher in education, not elementary school, which I started out at elementary school. And then high school. I did high school, but I'm talking about people that are at the university level, at the college level. And that probably is the most enjoyable part, because that was the most challenging part.
Yeah, why was it challenging?
The challenging is that, number one, you want to make an impression of these people so you can get the best out of them. So, because that's what you want. You want to get the best out of them because you know that there is a lot that they can tell you, teach you, and show you about life from a different perspective. So you're trying to conquer that new world, a world of information, but information that comes from different people, different places, different sites of birth and schooling. So that's basically it.
And so what did you teach those people? What did you want them to learn?
Well, I had wanted them to make sure that they knew that at the level they were, they had to know. So I would go asking questions and presenting them situations that they should have known how, if there were situations, how to deal with the situations. If there was a piece of knowledge, I want them to know.
Yeah, so you retired your official career 20 years ago, right?
Yeah, I was 66 when I retired.
So 19 years ago. So in those, what did you keep doing in those 19 years? Because just on Monday you hung up your hat, right? You hung up your tie.
Well, basically, I kept doing what I did, except that this time I did it in Spanish, not English. And secondly, these were medical students. I have taught medical students, but not as many. This was every year medical students, every year medical, the same level, different year, but academically they were the same level. And it was very challenging to find that the medical students I knew, they were primarily male students. When I went into medical school, there were over 300 of us, and there were only 5 females. Imagine that, over 300 with 5 females. Now I think it's more like it's not 50-50, but I think it's getting at least to be 40-60, and which is highly satisfying to me, because I am a feminist by heart.
So give us some context. What you were a doctor for 35 years at Mayo Clinic?
Correct.
Can you give us an abbreviated history of that?
Sorry.
Can you give us like a short short overview of your career in Mayo?
Of my 35 years?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's very important because in those 35 years, at least 5, the first initial 5, were my postgraduate. So I had to learn a higher level of the schooling I have had before. And furthermore, I was at Mayo Clinic. So I was supposed to be a higher level of, well, knowledge, expertise, and all around greater development, humanly, in a human sense, because of the age, but also because of the place I was. But I had the big challenge that I had to do all of this in a new language that it was not my maternal language, which was English. I grew up speaking Spanish from day one. This was a new language altogether, and I had to learn it by myself because in my high school there was no English. And in the medical school there was a small amount of English. Some people had a lot of English because of their schooling. They come from very expensive schools, secondary schools. I came from the very schools that were the lowest level, and that meant that the government paid schools, public schools, and we were not English at all. So English was to me new, but I knew that I had to know it, because I knew that the exams I would take in order to opt for my postgrad would be in English altogether. And I knew that they had to, and it will be spoken English and written English. And I was very much concerned with the spoken English, because I knew that I not only I had to know the word, but I had to understand what I was being said. So that was pretty tough.
Yeah.
Okay. So you learned the language, but there was also a cultural difference. What do you remember some of the cultural differences that either you struggled with or you were excited about, or any of the American cultural aspects you had to get used to that were so different for you, potentially?
Well, you know, I have heard a great deal about the cultural differences. And I don't know, for some reason, that did not become a matter of concern, because I didn't understand exactly what it meant. And furthermore, that was not a challenge once I met it, because I think it was simply presented to me with the perspective of people that were perhaps very impressed by it because of the lack of knowledge. But in my case, it wasn't. And in fact, I found that to be a pleasant side, because I felt that I was dealing with humans. They only made the difference they made in dealing with me, and the fact that they would have expected me to speak English, and if not speak English, speak a better English that would make myself better understood with them. But I was not. Some concern that it wasn't my concern, but the concerns of people that talked to me, knowing that I was going to the U.S. was that I was going to meet people that felt superior and perhaps would have been in terms of their language and my language, and that people that especially felt that Latin Americans were of a lesser degree in human development than the Americans.
What about, but I guess I'm curious, that you're saying the cultural differences weren't significant for you. However, you never developed strong friendships outside of your profession. Whereas you had those strong friendships that you still even have, like with your medical school friends, but you never developed strong friendships.
Well,
And was that a cultural?
let me tell you about this. I was not the kind of individual that made friends, and I was not. So, high school, I don't remember anybody that was my friend.
Okay.
Towards the end of high school, I made a friend who's still my friend, probably the only my best friend. And that individual went to medical school with me. So there was a better way of keeping the link and develop the link. And up to this point, I stayed with my best friend, and probably the only one I had that I could call my best friend. The other best friend died many years ago. So there isn't that much to be said, but only just to tell you, to show you, that I was not a guy that made friends.
Do you consider yourself an introvert?
Hmm?
Do you consider yourself an introvert or extrovert?
Well, I'm definitely an introvert, and everybody that ever talked to me, relate to me, and they would say that I was an introvert. And I perhaps was, I think I was more of an introvert, let's say, when I went into high school, that went into medical school, but I was still an introvert.
So my recollection of you as in your career is you traveling and giving talks and lecture. How did you go from not being able to speak the language to being able to go speak to large crowds and around the world, and how did
being an introvert also.
Yeah.
That's an excellent question. I think I realized that it was a challenge. I realized that I had to speak English for my postgraduate education to be what it turned out to be. So in other words, I was told at some point in my life that you only knew that could speak a language that was a foreign language when you thought in that language. So in other words, if I thought in Spanish, I was not an English-speaking individual. That I only become an English-speaking speaker if I thought about it. And somebody even said you have to dream in English.
And did that happen?
I think so. Once I got into the English-speaking world, and I made the very good decision, made a good decision, is that I said, I'm going to speak English. Not only when I am at work, but at home. I had to speak English. I had to speak English consistently. I will not say, oh, this guy speaks Spanish. I'm going to speak. No. I didn't allow that to me. So I immersed myself in the English-speaking culture. And I think that did it so well for me. The other thing I was told is that my English was I was not heavily accented in my speaking of English. And so I was believe, or I thought, that I sounded close to what I wanted to sound.
So then, a lot of people would hit 65 or 66 and just hang it up, where they would retire and go, go on cruises and eat bonbons and
Bingo.
and bingo. What made you decide you wanted to keep working, especially for nearly 20 years after? It's like a second
Well,
career.
when I had to retire, where I worked, Mayo Clinic, I gave my word, gentleman's word, with a handshake, that at age 65, no matter what, I would obey the law of Mayo Clinic. The law of Mayo Clinic was not a law, but the rule was at 65 you had to leave. They told you, by law, we cannot force you to leave because the law will protect you. You don't have to leave at 65. There is no age group. But working for Mayo Clinic, you must leave at age 65. We're going to help you to get into the new world, the world of retired people. They did. I took a course, a 5-year course. I mean, it didn't last that long, but in 5 years, I was met every so often with the idea that I had to attend a course that will teach me how to successfully retire. That was the name of the course, How to Retire Successfully. So I took the course. And in that course, it was not only that you were given talks about people that were knowledgeable of the system because they experienced it, but you were given ideas, you were given a support, financially and otherwise, to go out to the place where you would pick to be living at 65 years and older. And so they pay you. So they asked me, where is the most likely place you will retire to? And I said, well, Guatemala. They pay me a full week, not only the ticket to travel by air, but in a daily, a per diem, so that I could survive for 6-7 days. And they did that for 5 years with the idea that we make connections where I had picked to retire. So they said, make connections. If you like academic work, make connections in the academic world. Try to do it because that's where you're going to retire. If you know where you're going to live, try to find your neighbors. Talk to them. So at least when you retire, it's not going to be New World entirely. It's going to be something that you would know. So that was very helpful because I had decided to retire. So he said, well, why don't you make connections with the medical school you retired from? So I wrote, I don't know how many letters. They didn't bother to answer me, so that didn't work. But somebody said, but listen, in Guatemala, there is a brand new medical school. Why don't you write to them? And that was the medical school I had been working for. I did write to them. They were delighted to have me. So for 5 weeks, in 5 years, I came down to that place in Guatemala. It was very helpful.
Why? What are talking about
I knew
Guatemala?
that it had been conceived. As a matter of fact, I knew that it had been conceived in Antigua. So I wanted to come back.
But why?
And then I grew up in that place. I mean, that was a stroke. Well, maybe, now you made me think, maybe deeply in my heart, even though I had lived 37 years in that culture, I felt more comfortable being here. One thing, I think, now in retrospect, I confirm my feeling. I felt that it would be less demanding of me to live in this environment that to continue living up there.
In snow.
I think we're getting to the point.
Yes.
And also I could, in other words, it would be easier for me to make a living here that continue making it there. Furthermore, I didn't have the medical school connection up there. I had to make that, and I wasn't interested. If I could make it here, I would come here.
Okay. Okay, I have another question. So you did your residency at Mayo, but you did not want to stay at Mayo. They offered you a job, right? After you finished your residency, you said, no, I don't want to stay at Mayo. What made you, at that point, want to return to Guatemala?
Well, from the word go, I went to the States. I said, I will not live here.
Because?
Well, initially because it was a new environment and what have you. But after 5 years, almost 6, I still wanted to come to Guatemala. All right, why? I mean, with the family ties, friends, or not friends, but family ties. And the fact that, I was living there and when I have gone through 37 winters. That was not my environment initially. And I got used to it, but that didn't mean I will be comfortable closing the doors of a place where I live for 5, 6 months at a time. So, and I felt that living in that setting will rob from me the sense that I had for all my life of getting out and walking around. And furthermore, I had been walking around. I didn't run. I said, I'm gonna leave. I don't care about the winter. I will walk. But then I broke my leg doing so. And I was 50 some years when I broke my leg after many winters. And I said, my God, I'm over 50. And I broke a leg already. And that happened because I wanted to be outdoors. So what's going to happen as I grow older? I'm going to be very concerned. I'm going to break something else. So I think that answers your question.
So switching topics, what advice would you give to, Saskia's grandchildren or Corbin's grandchild? Or Serena's grandchild?
Well, that's a tough question because what I would do is I would relate to my experience. I don't know any other experience, so I think I would have to do, and I would have to say, you have to think who you want to be. Okay, I don't mean being an actress. I don't mean that. I want to be, you're a woman. You're going to be so many years. What will be the concerns you would have to make a living, for instance? What will be the things that will drive you to pursue this path of life? Being a person in a prayer. Is the place where you live right now where you want to develop your life, or you have a sense of what you want it to be, and it wouldn't be here. It would have to be someplace else. As a matter of fact, you might have been to that place and would like to give it a try. Give it a try. I gave it a try. So my personal experience was, I ventured in a world, all entire different, and I succeeded in making a living.
So you traveled so much, right? 1,000,000 miles on Northwest, 1,000,000 miles on Delta. Where did you feel most at home other than Rochester and Guatemala?
Gee whiz. And just to be truthful, I don't recall one place where I did feel unpleasant, uncomfortable being at. perhaps was the sense that I was opening new horizons, that I couldn't close my mind. I had some prejudices. For instance, I had something against Mexicans, so living in Mexico was not part of my ventures in the future. I also didn't have much of a admiration, sense of human ties with the French because I thought they were so stuffed up and what have you. So that was another thing. France would not be in a place where I would live, but otherwise, it would have been any place.
I remember you took all slides, right? You took thousands and thousands of pictures, and you'd show us slides.
It was so cool.
When you shot pictures, what did you want to take away from those? What did were you trying to capture a memory or a picture or a feeling?
Well, in one sense, I wanted to show that I had been there, that I had proof that I had been there, and that I could say something about it. And if I was showing the picture, I wanted to just simply show the picture was not it. Say, even if it was something bad that happened to me, I would say, in this place, well.
Yeah. Do you want to know, when I thought we were going to go to nuclear war with Russia, and you went to Moscow, I thought they were going to keep you. And you came back, and then you told us about how you almost died eating chicken.
That's where that was. I remember that story.
that.
He choked.
Do you remember
himself,
choking in
like, in a
Moscow
hotel room.
with the chicken bone?
Yeah. And he had to take a piece of bread that he found, like whatever from a meal, I don't know, and
That was in Moscow.
Yeah, do you remember?
That was
that?
in
I
Moscow.
realized it was in Moscow.
It was in Moscow.
Height of the Cold War.
In
In the height of the Cold War, a year after you took me to see Ronald Reagan at the Rochester airport.
Quite a change.
Yeah, quite a change.
No, but the fact that I was in Moscow had to do with it. The fact that I
Choked.
got shot
They were
with the
trying to
bow.
kill you.
It happened there, but it could have happened anywhere else.
So what do you look forward to in the future? You've lived a long life, you've
Well,
got a great place.
the one thing that I could tell you, for sure, definitely, is that I would not want to live where I live now, with the people I live now, especially with a person that is here that I will live with now. I would not want to get away from her. It's a woman. And I don't want to get away from the place where I'm here now. It's the most comfortable I've been in my life. I feel protected. I feel safe. But most of all, it's a pleasant sense that fills me all up.
Yeah.
That is lovely to hear. That's very beautiful.
Do you have any questions?
No, I don't know. That was such a good one to end on.
Okay, so let's take it in stages, right? When you were a teenager, is there anything you regret doing?
That's a very difficult question. But let me put it this way. I had many regrets. I many things because I didn't feel comfortable. But initially, for instance, going to parties and dancing with women, with girls, because I didn't feel comfortable. I felt, there was throughout of this part of my life a sense that I might be rejected, and I just hated just simply thinking that I would be rejected. I could not take that.
I have a question then. What advice?
I would tell that individual to be less introverted to be less of thinking that there was something out there that you might not want to go through. So in a sense, a fear perhaps. A fear that something out there is not going to be like you have had it up to that point, or something that you absolutely would not want to go through.
All right, what are you most proud of? And it better be me.
Well, I think that the most proud of thing I am in my life is that for the overwhelming part, I have made the right choices when I had to make them. And very few choices I have made in my life, I not necessarily regret them, but I absolutely feel that it was not the right choice. And those are just absolutely, you can count them, not even with my five fingers of a hand. And maybe because I made my decisions, and even though didn't know at the time, I was thinking.
Yeah, you stood by it and did it. You got one, Lisa?
No.
Is there anything you miss about the United States?
Oh, many things.
No.
Like what?
Many things. Life in the States was not unpleasant for me at all.
Right.
I mean, it was so pleasant for me to do simple such as on a Friday evening, grab the newspaper, look at what the shops were selling and what the prices were, and say, my God, and I made the rounds. On Saturday, I made the rounds.
That's right.
And I enjoyed tremendously to be picking something that I wanted to at the right price.
Nice. I think that's great. I think that's great. If you can find joy in that.
What
why not?
else?
Well, what else is that broke my routine? Because instead of going out of home very early on, when it was very cold at times, I got to do that around 2 o'clock in the afternoon of a Saturday and Sunday. The sun was out. It was not as cold. And also, I would pick the place I wanted to go to. And I would go to it by the route I wanted to be. That was not true on a weekday.
I think that's Rochester, Minnesota.
God, the simple pleasures, guys.
Yeah.
So, let's switch gears. What would you want Serena, Saskia, Corbin, and Ridley, and all the other kids to know about your parents?
Is to what?
What would you want your great grandkids to know about your parents?
My what?
Your parents.
My parents.
Yeah.
Well, I basically know that I had a very strict father, and I did well. I mean, it was not easy, but that was fortunate, because show me, that's life, and that's life perhaps that people I grew up with didn't have that. They had what I thought was a more pleasant parents. My dad was very strict. Well, the parents of these guys that live with me, because they grew up with me, my cousins, about the same age as I, at least two were about the same age. And the father could care less what they did, so they had a freedom and didn't have to think, oh my God, what's going to happen if.
about Mama Grace? What would you want your great-grandchildren to know about Mama Grace?
Well, know that I have the greatest mom
Oh.
that I could want to have.
What made her the greatest mom?
Hmm?
What made her the greatest mom?
Well, think like I thought. Here I was, the only man, the only son she had. And to compare, she had 4 girls. So she was bringing up 4 girls, and maybe one rule applied to them all, maybe not, but who knows. But he had only one boy. That boy, however, could not be brought up as a female. You see? So that was a challenge. That was a challenge. I cannot even think how that would work. But it was a challenge. And yet, she did it right, because she had to bring an equilibrium, a balance between a very, very strict, absolutely strict father, my dad. He would not tolerate a deviation from what he created was a pattern that had to be lived by. That's it. So I grew up on the one side, his side. And on the other side, my mom. Now you could say, well, maybe that shouldn't have been the ideal, because she created the other side of what dad portrayed to be or did. And then she had terrible things happening in her life. You know, like having a child that was mentally retarded. She had to be brought up in a very special way. And having to do that without losing sight of the fact that there were other 3 girls that needed attention, and she couldn't. And furthermore, had this soccer here, and that guy was taking perhaps more of an attention because he was a man.
What's your earliest childhood memory?
That's a very tough question, Cami. I guess on the one hand, perhaps more than what I just said, the fact that I had 2 very different, entirely different patterns of life that guided my upbringing. One, the very strict one, my dad wouldn't let anything go by. That was not something he approved. And on the other hand, mom was trying to counter that. And not only that, but she was a female. So a different proposition altogether, I think.
Yeah.
Do you remember how you felt when, so you grew up in the house with your grandparents, with all your cousins, and a lot of family and a lot of action, and then you guys moved to your house where it was just your family. Do you remember feeling any loss or any difference, or what that was like for you to have that change?
You know, that I haven't given that much thought to that. But, you know, I had no trouble. I had no trouble adjusting to it. As a matter of fact, I think it was pleasant. I think it was pleasant. It was a new world. And I was growing up, and I think I needed challenges. But I think it was very pleasant. I don't think I had any regrets. When I went to visit them, say, oh, gee, this is nice. But I had a nice, in my own place. Furthermore, he was so, I had my own room for heaven's sake. I didn't have to l- sleep with these three suckers and sorry about that, guys.
Okay, I have another question. So, the order, so Lucy was the oldest, then you, and then is it Bambi is the next?
Bambi is the third one.
And then Magda?
Magda was the
And then Betty.
Betty.
Okay, so what was that like growing up with a sister who was mentally retarded and had these needs? Like, were you expected to do any kind of caring for her, or what did that look like? Do you remember?
And what I do remember, but not remember, is that this was not a big thing for me.
Oh.
What it was a big thing, perhaps knowing that there was somebody abnormal and that was in my family. But the fact that I was living with this bunch of guys that were just the opposite, it took that away from me if I thought about that. But furthermore, she was a girl.
So you wouldn't.
And in my mind, I was a man's world.
So let's talk about your hobbies, right? You love music, you love operas and classical music. What brings you joy about listening to music?
You mean growing up?
Yeah.
Or now?
Or anytime. So again, our youth was going to concerts and going to Summerfest
And listening.
and going to places, and then always you had either classical music on
The
or
radio.
opera.
Was just talk.
Yeah, always.
But I grew up with that. And that was
I
my
didn't
own
realize
world.
that. I did not know that.
That was my own world. And finding out a new masterpiece and hearing it for the first time, and then realizing that somebody else, that maybe I should know about the guy that composed that, where was he, where did he, and so on. Curiosity about that individual. But also realizing that there was more to it. Beethoven Fifth, and a piano concert by somebody, and there was far more. And if I had not explored that, or at least tried to be exposed to it, I would not be fair to myself.
And what about opera? Or is it
Well,
the
opera,
same?
I opened up to opera late. In fact, I didn't like opera at the beginning because of the. I didn't like it. I didn't like it until I grew up. At the beginning, I rejected it as a young person, younger. Then I have some. My mom liked it. And at least one day or someday she said, listen to that. And I pay attention. She liked it, I had something like a recommendation.
Do you listen to music now, Dad? I haven't heard any music since we've been here.
I listen to the radio from the moment I open one eyes when I can. And I'm by myself, for instance. Because I'm going to put this woman through the terrible things that I listen to sometimes. Although I have. I didn't think she liked it much. She told me, you buy it, listen to that. No, now I listen to what entertains me. It doesn't have to be great. I listen to stupid things that the guys say in the radio nowadays. And what they occupy their memories, they're living into, what they talk about. Say, why would they be talking about that? That entertains me.
All right, so you can close right? Remember, you're talking to the future. You're talking to, you know, your great 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 grandchildren. So why don't you leave them off with a nice little send off?
Guys, girls, and boys, you have gotten this far. You grew up to be over your infancy. Your infancy might not be too far behind, but at least it's getting there. Now you're getting a new age. Be open-minded. Don't reject things just simply because you like them at the right time. I did it at one time. I'm sure I did it. I regret that. Not I don't regret it now, but I feel that that should have been the wrong thing to do, and I did it well. I learned from it. So be open-minded. And that means that listen to somebody who wants to talk to you. And listen to the medium. Read. You don't have to greatest read, but do read. And keep your mind open. Things are going to get in there and plant a seed.
Very nice.
That's fantastic. You are the last person on earth that I would expect to say that.
Is that right? Because I did it for you.
What's
But I love that, Dad.
What's-
Actually, Dad, you are an inspiration in that way to me. And I tell this to my children all the time, is that you have like evolved so much. Like when we were growing up, you were
Kids.
one way,
Yeah.
and then you were older and you were this other way, and then you retired and you were this other way, and that you have continued to really grow as a person, and I find that very, very inspiring and admirable.
We talk about this quite a
A
bit.
lot.
How old Tata wouldn't have been doing that, or wouldn't have spent that money, or stuff like that. So
Right.
it's such a beautiful thing
It's
to
cool.
see.
It's wonderful.
And then how happy you are. I mean, and you just said that also eloquently and so truthfully, and how we could all feel exactly how you're feeling. That's a different Tata than we grew up
Yeah.
with,
Yeah.
Not that
Not
was
in
a
a
bad
bad
thing.
thing.
No,
just
I understand.
your evolution, seeing it as being a good thing, you know?
Really good. Really
Yeah, it's
wonderful.
lovely.
Yes.
It's very inspiring.
It is, exactly.
I would like to say that it's been 36 minutes since he made a joke.
Yes, he's been very,
So,
he's been very well behaved.
Future generations just know. Usually, he was much more of a smartass.
Yes, exactly, future generations.
Estamos hablando porque este papá que tenemos ahora no era el papá que tuvimos. Entonces, a oírlo en decir estas cosas es
Muy bonito.
muy bonito.
Tú lo han descongelado.
Sí. De coco. Helado de coco.
Sí, pues él era más que se hace así.
Sí, muy
sí,
así
y
es.
muy negro,
Y voy
muy
al
blanco,
trabajo, y voy a viajar, sucker pigs, voy a oír mi música, ahí nos vemos de vez en cuando, something like that. Era muy black and white,
Sí, muy
así
negro y-
o así, no
ajá.
había muchas cosas en medio.
What,
Sí, o
what
así.
was your hardest day at work?
Oh, wow.
What was
Son of a-
what was no
Maybe he's forgotten that stuff
it could be
because
what
of-
I'm asking. I mean you've had two careers.
No, okay.
You
sí,
know?
that wasn't you.
I think in very general terms, because I can say, this happened to me once. Doing something or saying something that I very quickly regret that I had done or I have said. And I could not go back. I mean, that was it.
Right.
I think that was it. Because that then I didn't feel that I should have done what I did. So I was regretting every minute of it. But I couldn't do a thing about it.
It's life.
So how many students do you think you've seen over your lifetime? Do you have any, just a guess? A couple thousand?
Well, just to mention recently,
Yeah.
I had a group of from six, they were the smallest, to 13 every 8 weeks. So they will be with me 8 weeks.
And they were
And
from,
every 9 weeks they would change.
where were they from?
They were all Guatemalans.
So they were Guatemalans, and they
They were medical students.
Yeah. How far along in their
They're
school?
1 year away from doing their final year.
And so, what would you take them through in those 9 weeks?
But as I said, I wanted to know how much they knew about a given subject because I want to make sure that these people had been well brought up, thought. Because I said, this is the best medical school in Guatemala, and I still think so. If that is the best medical student and these guys don't know this much, we're done.
But what was it about? Specific medicine or specific?
Oh, absolutely
practice?
medicine. Absolutely medicine. But in doing that, you measure, you get the sense of the maturity of that individual. In other words, and maturity means previous education, bringing up, the bringing, what has happened to them, what was their elementary schooling.
So, but Dad, you said that you weren't a clinician. So here you're doing this practice with them, this education that was about like these giving them, case studies to, create the procedures or whatever, yeah. But that wasn't how you practiced as a doctor. So what was that switch like for you?
No,
then?
but you see, and it's true, I was not a clinician, but I was a clinician. I was brought up as a clinician. Before I became a pathologist, I was a clinician all the way, and a good one, a reasonably good one.
But you
I didn't say I am not gonna be a clinician. I said I wanna do this, which took me away, but not entirely, from being a clinician. So being a pathologist doesn't mean you or not have a sense for what a clinician should be. Furthermore, I've been a patient many times, and I can judge by being a patient who is a clinician, who is. Even though he or she may call a clinician themselves, to me they are not that good.
I have a question about the students that you had that usually dealt with, were they're all like 27 years old? Did they have an average age, or did you have a big range of ages? Just curious, was like
No, it's not a big range.
No?
No, they are very
mostly young.
contemporaries.
You would think, okay.
They are very contemporaries,
Are you gonna miss them? Are you gonna miss it?
Gonna miss. Yes, I'm gonna miss. I'm gonna tell you why. Before I retired, there was an old man that come to Mayo, a retired surgeon that had become a widower and probably missed being part of Mayo or being in that setting, and was living all by himself in an apartment and with very few exchange, and he would miss what he had.
Right.
So he would spend a lot of time walking around the hallways.
Like a ghost.
And if he finds somebody that was receptive or say hello or something, he would talk to them. and enjoy that.
Yeah.
And if he knew that you were a physician, especially if he knew you were about to retire, he had something to say.
Yes.
And then he said to me, you know, I give advice to everyone, and I get people bored and so on. Yeah, even there comes that old man and he's gonna be telling me something. To you, I'm gonna just give you one piece of advice. But listen to me, buddy. If you want to be old, no, if you want to keep younger, try to maintain your younger. If you want to maintain that, relate to young people. Try to find a way of getting with young people in your daily life. If not daily life, at least make part of your life the part that you're gonna be with young people. If you want to be old, on the other hand, get into a nursing home, and in a week's time, you're gonna be an old man.
So I think it's true.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I keep telling that to the guys. Guys, you're doing something for me. Because you're giving me the chance to deal with young people. And I was a piece of advice that was given to me. And that's true. So what did I get the most out of those? That's the fact that I was with younger people.
So you've given advice to the future generations and then to the future old people too. I think that's great.
Yeah, relate to young people. Live with young people.
You when
Don't ever say, oh, guys, that's too young. You know, go away. I mean, I want to deal with them.
You
No.
say, get off my lawn.
So related, Dad, when Camilo started the interview, he said, you know, how old are you? And you said 85. What age do you actually feel? Because it sounds like you're surprised that it's been 85 years. But if you had to just feel in your heart, in your soul, how old do you feel like you are?
Well, sometimes I marvel that I'm 85 and I'm still here
Yes.
and living as I do.
Yes.
That's probably a more common thing. And I feel very proud of it. Not that I want to impress people by saying, gee, I'm 85, look at this guy. No, it's how I feel. And I feel at 85, I don't feel that old. When I realized that my dad didn't make it that far. My dad died, poor thing, at age 77. And he died as an old man at age 77, I'm told. I didn't see much of it. But before the 77, when I lived with him, I think he was acting an older age because he felt old. And also I have a wife that is 80.